This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State's Ajay Sharda, Valentina, Pereyra, and Carlos Hernandez start the show by discussing the Institute for Digital Agriculture and Advanced Analytics and an upcoming symposium. Continuing the show is University of Nebraska Beef Systems Extension educator Alfredo DiCostanzo with information from his work around fine-tuning bunk calls that he presented at K-State's Beef Stalker Field Day. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk completes today's show. He says educating consumers about the nutritional value of milk and other dairy products is the first step to increasing demand and consumption. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Tuesday show with a discussion about K-State's Institute for Digital Agriculture and Advanced Analytics. And to discuss this institute, we're joined with Kansas State University Precision Agricultural Engineer Ajay Sharda, PhD student in K-State's Agronomy Department Valentina Pereyra, and Research Associate in K-State's Agronomy Department Carlos Hernandez. Ajay, before we discuss what this institute hopes to accomplish and an upcoming event, what is this institute?
This is an interdisciplinary institute. We are faculty coming from multiple colleges, College of Arts and Sciences, College of Agriculture and Engineering. This institute basically, is a collection of faculty members who are really passionate about both digital ag and the advanced analytic component of it. We all believe that going forward, most agricultural problems, challenges, technology innovation, engineering innovation, digital solutions, agronomic solutions need to be interdisciplinary, and none of us can individually provide the best answers or solutions or technologies to the producers and to the industry and all our stakeholders. So this team was anyways working together for a long time, and we believe that there are things which we need to do beyond the small group of people we were there working together. So this institute, which is formalized at K-State, actually intends to bring a lot more faculty into the fold of the institute, trying to develop individual verticals where people who are passionate about working in a specific topic, whether it is computer vision, data analytics, cropping systems, agronomy, or machine systems, technology development, or their passion is to develop, teaching programs, workshops, exchanging knowledge, doing outreach to people. So this institute intends to really take the all three components of land grant system, like research, teaching, extension, and go very boldly to tackle all these under the umbrella of, digital ag and advanced analytics.
And this is an interdisciplinary collaboration of all of these different colleges coming together. And not only is it just faculty and staff from those colleges, but it's also students. And so, Valentina, kind of what does that mean for you, and what are you excited to work on?
Yeah, for me, it's really good to see this idea coming into place, because I think we as a student can often feel there are some limits sometimes of disciplines working alone, trying to solve a problem. And I think in the coming students in the future, they will be really benefited by this kind of approach where many disciplines work together to solve an issue that it was trying to be solved independently before.
And Carlos, what makes you excited to be working within this institute?
And so I think that maybe it's a very good opportunity to improve our skills, but also to create different type of things, integrating different type of technologies and knowledges, using the skills from different students from different colleges. And maybe for me, one of the most important aspect is that usually, as Valentina mentioned, we was working alone in the past, and maybe the next generation of the students need to work in a integrated way, because sometimes we don't take care or we don't take in mind so many aspects about the different type of things that we don't know, probably. And yeah, I think that maybe those are the most important thing for me.
And as we look forward for the first couple of years of this institute, kind of what are some few things that you're hoping to get off the ground?
Our first biggest goal is to let people know that this institute is there. Let people know that the leadership at Kansas State University is all in about digital ag and advanced analytics. That's important for the state of Kansas. That's important for Kansas State University and for the faculty who really want to develop these disciplines. We want to, like I talk a little bit, we want to develop individual verticals where people can really bring their individual talents to the table. We want to reach industry, already work with lots and lots of industry partners, but we are looking for one or two very strong strategic industry partners who can become the face for hand-in-hand development of technologies and innovation and all those solutions, who can be part of, teaching training programs, part of campus-wide contribution towards facilities, philanthropic activities, part of community. And then we also want to, really aggressively go towards, federal funding programs where we can develop a strong research program which can funnel a lot of outreach activities. At the same time, we also want to, hit some of the educational and teaching, grants as well, so that we can, in parallel, develop those capabilities as well.
Talking about industry partners, a symposium is coming up soon with the Digital Ag Institute.
We are holding the Digital Ag and Advanced Analytics Symposiums on October 23. It's a symposium organized and led by graduate students, so that's where we come into place mainly. And the main goal of this symposium is to embrace the philosophy of the Institute. We will be holding poster sessions. And the topics covered in the symposium try to embrace the same ones as those covered by the Institute. We are trying to bring students from different departments, from engineering, arts and sciences, agronomy, related to remote sensing, statistics, robotics, and many more, but make sure to check those in the website.
Carlos, who do you think should take the time to attend this event, and how do they go about maybe registering or finding out more information about it?
Yeah, you can obtain more information in di3symposium.com. That is our website for the symposium. And also I think it's a very good time to learn more and make networking with many graduate students, undergraduate students. Probably we are inviting a lot of students of the different universities around of Kansas. Also, many farmers are interested to come because they are thinking that maybe it's a good opportunity to be more involved in those topics that probably are changing changing the agriculture in those days.
Do people need to register for this event?
Yes, we really need them to register, so we encourage everybody to do so. It's an event for free, so that we want to have as many people as possible and everybody to feel welcome.
This event is taking place October 23rd at the K-State Alumni Center. And as we've talked about this institute and the symposium, what does this mean for ag producers?
I think this is the first opportunity where all these faculty members have come together, and their students have come together. I really want to emphasize that this is a students-led effort. Their leadership, their passion about the topics they're working on, and their passion about showcasing all the research they are doing. And I think this is one of the greatest opportunity for our producers to come out and see what our students are engaged in. Get to learn what we are doing, and more importantly, we really want to listen from them. What do they want us to do? What are the problems or challenges they are facing? What are the things we can integrate into our research programs or teaching programs and outreach programs which can directly help them? Everything what we do, we talk to our producers, our industry partners, and really understand what the true challenges on grounds are, and that's how we do our work. But it's always fun, it's always exciting, and it's always a great opportunity to listen from them, from producers directly. We'll really give a shout out to those guys to come out, check out what students are doing, and also give us feedback about what they think and what direction should we take going forward.
One of the things that I wanted to mention is in this event is organized by the graduate students, but also probably will be the entire bunch of the persons involved in the agriculture, because are not just faculties and graduate students, are persons from industry, people from the different public institutes. And I think that maybe it's a very good opportunity to know what are the thoughts about the person that are on another side.
AJ, Valentina, Carlos, I appreciate you all taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
That was Research Associate in K-State's Agronomy Department, Carlos Hernandez, and he was joined by Kansas State University Precision Agricultural Engineer Ajay Sharda and PhD student in K-State's Agronomy Department, Valentina Pereyra. If you'd like to learn more information about this institute, you can do so on Kansas State University's website and searching for Institute for Digital Agriculture and Advanced Analytics. If you'd like to learn more about the upcoming symposium, you can do so by going to da3symposium.com. Again, that is da3symposium.com. The symposium is taking place October 23rd at K-State's Alumni Center in Manhattan, Kansas. They do ask that you take the time to register for this event. I will also link news releases related to these topics in today's show notes, which, as always, you're able to find on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we'll be joined by University of Nebraska at Lincoln beef extension educator Alfredo DiCostanzo as he discusses fine-tuning bunk calls. We're now cutting to that short break. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show now with the University of Nebraska at Lincoln Beef Systems Extension Educator Alfredo DiCostanzo. Alfredo, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Alfredo, you're a presenter at K-State's Beef Stalker Field Day, and you presented on fine-tuning bunk calls in the grow yard. And as we start this conversation, a big point for feeding is what effect humans and equipment have on this.
The idea here is that obviously there's errors introduced by both humans and machines that we need to take into consideration when feeding cattle in the grow yard.
For that equipment, kind of how much variability is there usually above and below?
Typically we have a 10-pound variance on these scales that we use to feed animals. Obviously the pen size that determines how much that delivery will be. But including with that, we have the effects of changes in moisture concentration of the feeds we have, things such as ground hay that are left exposed that catch rain, for example, or open piles of silage or any other feedstuffs could potentially have variability in moisture other than their own by harvest times and dates and so forth. So this has an implication on the actual concentration of dry matter of the diet, which then has an implication on the actual delivery amount that one intends to do in that bunk at that day.
So for producers, well, I'm sure they would appreciate dry matter to always be the same. That's not the case. So how do you recommend they kind of track that?
Well, based on our studies, we recommend a weekly measurement of dry matter. For those individuals that have access to a Coster tester, it is a very simple measurement procedure to obtain dry matter within about an hour and a half, or the alternative is to use a microwave, being very careful not to burn the system down. But anyway, so one is able to track dry matter, or simply, if it is a weekly event, one can send it into a lab or back to a kitchen somewhere so that it can be dried overnight somewhere, right? And so that measurement then is taken into consideration for about a 3-week running average to be able to change the composition of the diet based on that observation, that weekly observation that's averaged every 3 weeks.
And other than dry matter, what else do producers probably need to track?
Well, I think it's important to track, at least on a monthly basis, the protein, the fat, and fiber of the diet, all of that leading to the energy concentration, which, for me, the simplest way the way that's really recommended is to sample the ingredients, submit those to a test, and then come back with a composite of what that total protein or fiber or fat is in the diet itself, rather than grabbing a sample from the bunk. The reason for me not suggesting the samples from the bunk is because samples from the bunk may have errors in sampling.
When feeding in feed yards, something that you mentioned is bunk scores, and thinking about how humans, even with the same information, there can be a lot of variability.
Yes, we studied just simply the introduced variability from moisture concentration changes in actual feedlot feed ingredient piles. And that led to the observation that if we decide to make a bunk call of 1 pound, right? So we're going to feed 1 more pound of dry matter today or relative to yesterday, whatever the case might be, 40% of the time we will be in error, even in the best of circumstances, by feeding too much or too little relative to that pound. So that's a set bias in the system. There's nothing we can do about it other than be familiar with it and recognizing that what that means to us is that if we're ready to bring cattle on feed, that we're not going to be pushing them too high, because that error may take us lower or higher than we expect.
You did some work on this and some research and looking into a bunch of different things, and something within it was looking at how temperature and how producers reacted and how much change they had in feed.
Beyond that, we have the human behavior, right? So there would be 10 individuals with the same prescription of what to do today based on a bunk score from what they observe in the bunk. The response is going to be hopefully based on a prescription, but then our own human idiosyncrasies lead us to maybe be more aggressive, less aggressive. It's just simple human nature. So what I did is I studied about 7 of our feedlot operators when I was at Minnesota, and what was their response in terms of feed deliveries, just by simply measuring the variance on each individual pen. What's important here is that to measure that variance, we need to have diets that are common, obviously, to each other pen, right? But also, we don't want to be measuring this when cattle are going up on feed or they're moving cattle out of the pen, et cetera, et cetera. So it needs to be a pretty steady period, other than temperature changes, of course. And so when we did that, we recognized that there would be individuals that had tremendous variability pen to pen. So, in essence, one might say from 10 to 14% coefficients of variance, to as little as 5 to 7%, depending on who the individual was. And that simply represents human behavior. Nothing wrong with any one of these individuals. It's just simply their behavior. So translating that to the grow yard, we just need to be aware that that happens. If I'm a manager, if I'm a consultant, then perhaps I need to track variance by each of these feeders and maybe help them moderate their ambition in certain cases, because the impacts in two of the examples that I have is that cattle were pushed too much ahead of a heat stress event, and then those cattle lost intake and never ever came back. The other scenario is an individual that was more measured in their approach. Maybe they challenged cattle, but they were only presenting an extra 1/4 pound of feed dry matter per day, and cattle responded very nicely. You can see it on the charts. The summer feeding charts for the one individual are wavy and bumpy and rough. The summer feeding chart for the other individual is actually fairly smooth.
And so what is coefficient variation?
Coefficient of variation is simply, and any Excel program, any computer program can measure this. We're all familiar with averages, right? So we say, well, these cattle ate 18 pounds of dry matter. Got it. But there's a measure of variance around that, and that is simply a standard deviation, which is calculated from a tool like Excel, or most calculators are able to do that. And so we simply divide the standard deviation by the average. That number comes back as a percentage. That percentage, the larger it is, the worse it is. That means we have a very wavy, serrated, if you will, much like like a saw teeth, up and down on intake, relative to a smoother curve. So 7%, 5% curve would be pretty smooth with very small ups and downs. 14%, a greater percent than 14 would be up and down quite a bit, and that represents to me somebody that probably needs to be addressed as far as how they respond to these behaviors by cattle.
And how have you seen cattle performance be impacted by this?
Yes, so all of this is great and wonderful, but if it has no impact, then why are we doing it? Because we had research pens, we were able to go back to the within pen variance. Again, same thing. If the average of the pen was 900 pounds, what was the lightest animal, what was the heaviest animal, what was that range, and what was the variance of that? So again, standard deviation of the pen divided by the average gave us greater variance for individuals that were more bumpy on their deliveries. So I could tell you I'm going to sell a 1,400-pound pen, but likely there might be 150 to pounds up and down from that. What that means is somebody that feeds more consistently over time will probably have much less variance, maybe 70 pounds off of that 1,400-pound average.
Now, Alfredo, from all of this, what would you like beef producers to get from it?
Simply, I think it's time to start looking at just the standard deviation of the pen deliveries, which there's many programs out there today that are being offered for producers to track dry matter deliveries. Whether it's dry matter or grass-fed deliveries, as long as the diet doesn't change very much, we're not asking for that much complication on this process. We need to just take a look at the whole column of feed deliveries from, say, day 45 on feed on a grower diet to the end of that growing period, for example. So that could be 90 days, whatever that number is. And then measuring from that the standard deviation divided by the average and say, hey, I'm in the 5-7%, I'm probably going to be okay. Somebody is at 12 to 20% or higher, watch out. Something has really been bouncing things off. Obviously, the first culprit might be weather. It might be equipment issues. It may be that we are putting cattle in and out of that pen. We don't really want to have artificially inflated variances by things we do. We need to permit weather, human error, etc., ingredient changes to reveal themselves in this variance. And once we observe that, then declare for ourselves when is our trigger points. To me, something below 10% is ideal. Something above 10% is a trigger point to say something is going on here. We need to address this.
Alfredo, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about fine-tuning bunk calls.
Thank you.
That was University of Nebraska at Lincoln Beef Systems Extension Educator Alfredo DiCostanzo. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's Milk Lines. As part of its review process, the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee is looking at dairy product consumption in the U.S., which shows that 90% of Americans are not consuming the recommended daily amount of dairy. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk says this presents an opportunity for producers to increase demand and educate consumers about the important nutrients that milk provides.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers and consumers in general about some of the things that are going on in Washington, D.C. concerning the dietary guidelines for dairy product consumption. National Milk has been in front of the committee recently and wanted to share some of the things that they expressed during that meeting. Number one, according to data presented, 90% of Americans do not consume the recommended servings of dairy each day. So when we look at opportunities as dairy producers, if we had consumers here in the United States that were consuming a higher level of dairy in their diet, that would increase, obviously, the demand for raw milk and actually help us out when we look at where we're at with supply and demand today. Now, one of the drawbacks to dairy in the diet, at least from a historical perspective, has been the fat level. And sometimes that is overshadowed what we maybe should be considering as consumers. Recognize that dairy contains 13 essential nutrients. Some of the maybe more important ones are things like calcium, potassium, vitamin D. And when we look at public health concerns, those are actually three of the top 4 when it comes to nutrients. So milk is very important in our diet because of the nutrients that it contains. Now let's talk a little bit about dietary fat and the fact that most of the fats that are found in milk are saturated. And in the past, saturated fats have been looked on with concern when it comes to things like heart disease and maybe even diabetes and some other human health issues that we have. However, that's in the past. Your checkoff dollars for dairy producers, a lot of that has been going toward research that actually shows the benefits of dairy products in the diet. And those studies that have been published show that including dairy into the diet has either a neutral effect or a beneficial effect on the health of people. So the negative effects that we talked about in the past, newer research is saying, well, that's not the case. So as we look at that, we need to make sure that we really understand that dairy does have some very important things to offer and benefits to a healthy diet. Now, let's talk about those other beverages, those plant-based beverages that we see in the store and that seem to be gaining some increase in consumption with our population here in the United States. Some of the important things that I think consumers need to recognize is that the composition of plant-based beverages is not the same as natural milk. And there are some very great differences between the products that are out there in terms of their nutrient density. So if you're trying to use a plant-based beverage as a replacement for dairy products in your diet, please understand that you're not getting the same level of nutrients when you consume those as if you would consume products that are based on natural milk as opposed to plant-based products. Again, things will change as we go down the road, and maybe those plant-based products will become something that is more uniform, but right now understand that there's a tremendous amount of variability and that the nutrients found there are not the same as what we find in dairy products from natural milk. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our consumers and dairy producers to be aware of the choices that we have in the grocery store when it comes to products that contain dairy and the benefits of those to our diets.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.